on the same night. Yes, I am really bored and got nothing else better to do. It's been very cold here in California, so to help keep myself warm, I got to run my mouth. And I got the heater on full blast. I got coffee, so I'm caffeinated. So, the topic of topics was pretty much addressed on the Button Check YouTube channel, where they bring up any drama, well, any FGC related drama, in the fighting game community. And so 3 days ago, there was a topic of why, Street Fighter 5 and the FGC are dying. And I guess some people in the FGC community, Giuna, and Brian, dang, I forgot that dude's name. He used to play Street Fighter 5. He used to be a Kin main. Started debating, why is there new blood in the FGC, and why, too many people are not going out to events, and how it differs between America and Japan. Well, the fact of the matter is, there are very factors that pretty much have gone into why that is the case, and I will bring those up right now. I would say the main thing that happened was the hype era of the FGC pretty much ended 4 years ago. What I mean the hype era, and I know oftentimes I either get people trying to debate with me on it, but oftentimes most people don't even comment when I bring this up, and that just pretty much which lasted between 2009 when Street Fighter 4 released up until 2018 has ended. And what the hype era was just a big, it was like a fighting game revolution and a fighting game boom. It was like, you had that, I would have to say, I would call it basically, because nothing can match up with the hype era, even though if you go through, I guess, the lexicon and the history of fighting games, as far as my perspective, it's like its roots is rooted in the arcade scene. But what got a lot of people into playing fighting games was when consoles came out. Street Fighter 2 was a huge seller. Yes, it did really, really good at arcades, but it did probably just as well selling on a Super Nintendo. And then since Street Fighter 2 came out, games in the 90s, and Capcom pretty much, ushered it in, you could say, in terms of making fighting games as a genre relevant. And it was a boom. It was like, from Street Fighter 2, you had Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter 2, you had many iterations of it. It was released on the Genesis. And then you had the Street Fighter Alpha games, and then the next big Street Fighter game was like X-Men vs. Street Fighter. But I think it really done well if they would have ported it on the Saturn, but the Saturn was a dying system. And I think Sony paid Capcom to release the game on the PlayStation because I think X-Men vs. Street Fighter would have sold some Sega Saturns. I believe it would have. It's like, I still got my Sega Saturn. I have my X-Men vs. Street Fighter. I have my Marvel Superheroes. I have my X-Men Children of the Atom. I have my Marvel Superheroes, versus Street Fighter. And those were the games that pretty much, even some of the Darkstalker games that ushered in, that made fighting games as a genre, popular. It gave it legs. And then at that time, you had the 3D fighters. You had your Tekkens. You had your Virtual Fighters. You had your Dead or Alives. You even had Soul Blade, which is the first game of the Soul Calibur series. And the funny thing is, it's like Soul Calibur is almost kind of like a spin-off or a rebranding of Soul Edge, because it went from Soul Edge on PlayStation, and then it didn't come out till what, years later on as a launch game for the Dreamcast called Soul Calibur, and it's been called Soul Calibur ever since. But the first game of the series of these games is Soul Edge, and you get that on the PS1 for relatively cheap, complete. It's not too much of an expensive game. If I know, PS1 games are slowly going up in value, especially fighting games. But yeah, you can definitely pick up, Soul Blade for relatively cheap, not too expensive. I think I should just say not too expensive, because relatively cheap could mean different things to different people. Because some of y'all people are some broke motherfuckers and don't really want to pay any money. It's like cheap for you guys is $10 and below. But the hype era, though, was, that's where it introduced the Justin Wongs, and it made fighting game players like pseudo-celebrities in the fighting game community as well as the gaming community as a whole. It made these guys, pseudo-celebrities, based on how they did at EVO and other major tournaments. Their comebacks, the combos, and, their pop-offs, became legendary as far as esports. But before the hype era, fighting games were kind of after the 90s, and after Street Fighter 3, there was a dead period between, I would have to say, between 2000 and, between 2000 up to whatever. There were still a lot of fighting games being made, but pretty much the hype of, because if you listen to Street Fighter fans, they're like, if Street Fighter ain't doing well, then fighting games aren't doing well. It's been a while since I played this game, so some of my shit I'm just gonna be pushing buttons. It's been a while since I played Soul Calibur 6. So the hype era, was basically that time where everybody was playing tons of various fighting games. Street Fighter 4 was huge. It was like what else was huge? Mortal Kombat 9 was huge, and Justice started getting big. All these top fighting games were starting to become big. It was like, I think the only one that came into Tekken did have its place with Tekken Tag 2. Not many people cared, with Tekken 6, but Tekken Tag 2 came around and revitalized the franchise of Tekken. It's gonna take me a while. I haven't played this game in probably almost a year. So the hype era, it made a lot of players celebrities. It made them known names in esports. It introduced a lot of people who weren't into fighting games because people, they wanted to be where the action is. So it started to get, more people into fighting games. It was like early on, it was pretty toxic. I already discussed that whole thing with my other FGC video when I was playing Dead or Alive 5. That was the hype era. Everything was hype. That's how Maximilian Dude made his name. Doing fighting game content was during the hype era. So many other people, got their content, from the hype era. Team Spooky became known, synonymous with that. People who streamed the events. What's that dude's name? A lot of announcers became household names in the FGC. Yipes, all those other guys. Ultra David, James Chen. People started recognizing foreign players. Japanese, Korean started becoming household names. It made a lot of no names became relevant. Even King of Fighters with King of Fighters 13 got their chance to be in the spotlight. That comeback. So there was a lot of things going on in the hype era. But since people, I guess, I don't pay attention to Twitter. I don't follow Twitter. But I guess people in the Twitter spheres people are getting bored with fighting games. Which is weird because probably like maybe almost a month ago, I was talking about, how I felt, the fighting game as far as the scene and stuff like that was pretty healthy. But it looks like I may be wrong. Maybe it's just the Street Fighter V community. Because like I said, you know, whenever they have stuff that makes big news, a lot of channels focus on the Capcom side of the fighting game community. So it could be just them. But I think overall, I think people are having kind of fighting game fatigue to a certain extent, because we've been having, you know, 3 to 4, at times 5, well, not that many, but I'll have to say at least 3 or 4 fighting games releases, you know, notable releases, like every year. And there's going to be fatigue, and there's not many people who's going to, you know, spend that time trying to be good in with each and every game that comes out, like every year. It's like, because I know Axis, it's been a floodgate, you know, probably ever since of them releasing games since what, 2015, 2016, they've been releasing a fighting game every year. Capcom, you know, these have been ride or die with Street Fighter V, and Street Fighter V was kind of trash when it launched and improved over time. But it's like, right now, people are kind of burnt out. And then the OGs who played back in, you know, I guess the sweet spot of the hype era, I'll have to say the sweet spot was between 2011 and probably around 2015, 2016 was the sweet spot. That's where it was the hypest. Well, no, I would say not. Yeah, probably 2015 was where it was at its hypest. Even though I have to say 2017 was a pretty hype Evo. Even though I didn't really care for a lot of the games that were being broadcast, but in terms of the overall hype of the matches were pretty good, highly competitive matches. But so yeah, that's point number one, is why, you know, fighting games are kind of, you know, they kind of ran their course right now. The hype era ended. It's over. I feel it ended 4 years ago in 2018, but based on what people are saying now, I think it now has officially ended. And it's like, even with Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8 coming back, it's still not going to be the same. Because it's like, I could see those two games will be headlining Evo for probably the next 4 or 5 years after they drop. Any other games coming out are pretty much going to get ignored unless they're really, really, really good games. But I think a lot of people are fatigued at this point. Oh shit, about to get lit. Yep, she got me. Nipple. One thing I like about Soul Calibur, they took a page out of DOA's book and they went sexy, full on jiggle physics. I think they go a little step further with the nipple prints, because I know on Street Fighter V they got rid of their nipple spots with a patch. As far as you know, Street Fighter V, Chun-Li and Kenny, you know, they nerfed some of the jiggle fix on the female characters. They changed some of the camera angles, but I'll bring that up later. But here's another reason why I feel that FGC, you know, is not getting any real new blood in the community. It's like I said, fighting games have gotten stale. The depth has been sacrificed in favor of accessibility and game mechanics that limit player creativity when playing these games at a high level. So that is one thing I posted. You know, fighting games have gotten stale. The over accessibility and kind of a lot of games being mashy and playing very loose. Because the one thing about older fighting games is like they were games. It's like you had to be creative within the boundaries of what the game gave you. And so you didn't have as many options as older games, but you were creative in terms of playing your character, you know, in terms of playing your character, your main character, to try to get wins. And that's what made games, you know, hype, was people seeing what people come up with, being under those kind of restrictions of the confine of the game. But when games started giving you more options, it lessened the creativity of the player to the point where a lot of players, you know, playing, you know, whether for content, to win at events, especially the high competitive scene, You know, the player who's the most optimal has the best reads and reactions, but has the most optimal combos that can do the most damage is the player who's going to win. And if you're not doing optimal combos, then you're kind of nerfing how you're playing that character unless you have some other way to make those games. And so, but recent fighting games are a lot loose. They're heavy offense based, and that's because of the hype era. You know, companies were like, oh, this is giving us, you know, publicity and news. You know, we're getting streamed, we're getting people checking out our products, we're getting more people, you know, buying our games. And it's like, how can we get, you know, more customers to buy our games by making sure they're able to, you know, to have some way to do all this fancy and cool shit that high-level players are doing. So that's why they made the games accessible. You know, you got one-button combos, you know, and stuff like that. You know, you have these options that you have comeback mechanics, you know, revenge super meters, you got V triggers. You got one button if your life bar is low, like Tekken, you push one button, you'll do like a special and get like an easy 35 to 40% damage on your opponent. Same thing with DOA and stuff like that. And so they made things a lot more accessible. The problem with making things accessible, it makes it easier for the pro and really good competitive players to put these games in the lab and basically come out with good strategies, combos, and tech within a month, when a small amount of time, bring them to tournaments and still obliterate everybody else. You know, a new player, no matter how much you make a game accessible, is not going to beat people who are truly passionate and take these games, who are very passionate about these games. You know, who put in the hours, you know, who grind these games. Some people, it's their livelihood, and the reason they play it is for reputation, for content, or, you know, just because they love the game. And so, yeah. Fighting games have just gotten stale. You know, I think DNF Duel is the perfect example of that. The recent Dungeon Fighter game. People were all hyped and like, oh, this game is going to be good, whatever. And then after about a month and a half, people were like, this game is kind of mad. You know, there's not, this game is just spammy. It's kind of unbalanced. You know, there's no really defensive options, you know, to handle all this cheese. And so when I'm watching like videos of Maximilian Dude and he's playing against players who are pretty much pro and fighting games in general, and he's holding his own against these players, that ought to tell you how accessible and pick up and play recent fighting games have gotten. Especially Arc System Works games, but you know, they made that decision on purpose. That's a business decision. My first throw in a while. Hey, bam! Alright, here's another point. You know why fighting games are pretty much losing, you know, having a hard time getting new players is, I would say for casual fighting game players, collectors, and lovers, it's about producing content more so than paying money to an offline event and getting your face beat in. I said many of them have the mindset of why be the face of the FGC as a player when you can become one from just producing FGC and FGC related content like Maximilian Dude and many others. You know, like I've been saying, you know, for years, I've been telling like hardcore competitive players that they are just a very vocal minority of the fighting game community as a whole. I'm like non-hardcore competitive fighting game casual players and fighting game collectors, people who like playing fighting games, you know, probably just for their own. They like the lore of the fighting games, they like the storyline, they like the character designs, they like the waifus, they like the dudes, they like playing the games as a single player experience. You know, once in a while they'll play against their friends, but most of these players are not going to travel to no tournament to waste money just to get their face beat in. It's like, even, you know, I say a lot of people like playing fighting games at a casual level, and it's funny, like for me, when, you know, guests come over or somebody's like, oh, you got Street Fighter, let's play Street Fighter. So a lot of normies are familiar with Street Fighter, and some of them play it, and some of them might know a few basic, you know, special moves or whatever. But me being playing the game since Street Fighter 2 for like 30 years now, since 92, it's like I am way ahead of them in terms of skill and how to play the game at an intermediate level. It's like I can use, you know, 7 or 8 characters at an above casual button mashing level. And so it's like I give them a round or whatever to see what they got, and then after that, you know, the kitty gloves come off and I just beat the shit out of him. I should have threw him when he kept on doing that shit. He's baiting me. I always hated Kill It in Soul Calibur. Fun to play, but in terms of his AI, he's either very aggressive and very spammy, and that's how people play him online. Did I get him? How you block? Oh, it's unsafe. He's playing smart now, start to sidestep. But yeah, you know, the hardcore competitive players, they are a minority. It's like if all the competitive players bought a certain game, it probably wouldn't even sell. Well, I think for Street Fighter, I think it would probably sell at least 1 million copies as far as, you know, their hardcore. Nah, probably not. I would say probably have to say 3,000 to 3,000, 500,000 copies of it would sell just based on its hardcore competitive community alone. I said, but for fighting games to sell millions of copies, you know, it has to have that casual accessibility for, you know, just normies to pick up and buy it. You know, that's how Call of Duty became successful. That's how NBA 2K became successful, because gamings are more social. So if normies see a lot of people are buying the game, they're going to buy the game. And so that's what happened with Tekken 7. How Tekken 7, I think, sold, what, 12 million copies? I think it sold 12, 13 million copies. Because everybody else was playing Tekken. And plus, you can get a used copy of Tekken for like 17 bucks. You know? And so, you know, as a casual player and a fighting game collector, and it's like, you know, you just gotta have that mindset of where, you know, you see these pro players, they're really good, but for you to be like a pro, you know, you gotta, in order to make money doing it, you gotta make top 8s consistently, and you gotta win some tournaments. It's like, shoot, I would say Sonic Fox was a $250,000 before he reached like age 21. It was like those freaking Injustice and MK tournaments. He was winning hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was winning hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then, you know, you put that on top, you know, of him being good at DOA, top 8ing Soul Calibur, you know, winning Skullgirl tournaments. I think he even top 8 a couple of Street Fighter 5 tournaments. What other games is he playing? I think he played some Tekken. He topped 8 a couple of Tekken tournaments. I think he tried to play some Guilty Gear. I think early in its cycle he was doing okay. I think he was a top 10 player in that early in its life cycle. Did I get her? Yeah.
I will not lose.
The battle is over.
And so that's one thing. You know, you have a lot of players who just want to they like playing fighting games, but they know they're not going to put in the time and be good enough. Even if they put in the time, that doesn't mean they'll be good enough to probably, you know, beat even some C tier, well-known, you know, fighting game players. who are just known for doing flashy shit, but they don't win a lot. or players who are known more for, just being a face and being a name more so than how often they win. They're not the cream of the crop. They're not top 8ing, but they are, probably making, they're probably in the top 30 of Street Fighter players.
The memories of ancient.
Yeah, casual player said, I'd rather make my bread and butter being entertaining as an FGC producer of content than being actual, hardcore player. Because it's, to be honest, it's probably, less stress. You don't have to worry about, oh my god, this dude, fucking Wayne, get off me. Come here. Oh, broke that shit. Gotcha. Alright, I'm starting to feel myself a little bit here. Playing Soul Calibur for me is like riding a bike. It's just, you never forget. But it does take you a while to figure shit out. Granted, I'm only playing on normal. So the computer is not going to block a lot of my bullshit.
Victory will not come easily. It must be seized.
But so another thing, I think another thing that has changed is fighting games as a trend has ended. Companies also kind of played a part in this because all forms of entertaining is being quote unquote modernized. Basically. Oh, I forgot. I didn't even push pause. I'm over here talking. I'm thinking it's still the replay. Oh, did I get him? Did I get him? Yes, I got him. That was a nice combo. It's skilled though.
I will not lose.
Still did okay damage. About 35-40% damage. Ah, he got me. I almost made that comeback. I gave him one hell of a life lead and almost ran it back. But yeah, companies been trying to modernize their game. They're putting social politics, making things woke, desexualizing their female characters. So it's yeah. And especially like NetherRealm with their Mortal Kombat 11, man, them girls were like fully clothed. Except when you got some DLC costumes or whatever. But it's like, so that has made people buy out of playing fighting games too, because it's like, you're kind of killing what I loved about playing these games in the first place was the fantasy aspect. People like the sexiness. People like the crazy character designs. People like, just the weird kind of fan serving things and fighting games and the animations and the outfits, the clothing. Because I was watching, I think, True Underdog Gaming, and he talked about how the community is upset that they're not bringing back a classic Melina costume because it shows a little bit of skin, some legs, some cleavage, but that's Melina as a character. She's always been kind of the combination of sex and violence. She got that sexy Adenia body, but that ugly Baraka face. So, them covering up is not really what her character is about. That's why I say for me, like the best, like my best for favorite Mortal Kombat game ever. It used to be Mortal Kombat 2, but no, it's Mortal Kombat 9. That's because graphically and gameplay wise, the tone, the story mode of the game, it's fun, even though it's challenging. This game came out before, I think 2013 or whatever. Games were still kind of challenging before they started putting all this accessible bullshit in their games. And it emphasized what Mortal Kombat is about: fantasy, violence, and basically cheesy B-movie you know, kung fu flicks. That's Mortal Kombat. That's the way it always been. I think there's this one YouTube channel where this guy complains how clunky and amateurish the animation is in Mortal Kombat, but that's a part of the charm of Mortal Kombat. You know how it plays, its clunkiness, its, you know, its weirdness. It is what it is. That's what makes Mortal Kombat Mortal Kombat. And so, but yeah, people have left fighting games because of that. I know, perfect example of that was Dead or Alive 6. A lot of horrible marketing, say they're going to minimize the sexiness, you know, the costumes, even though they still had some DLC, but it wasn't as much DLC as DOA 5. You know, they putting in clothing filters in the game, and the director trying to make for the American, you know, marketing in America, you try to make the game was just, oh, we're not gonna, because it was during the height of the Me Too movement, like around 2018 when the game was announced. So he was kind of feeding off of that vibe. And then when they had the game at Tokyo Evo, they went full, you know, fan service sexiness with marketing the game before a tournament, to the point that Tasty Steve and Markman looked embarrassed during the live stream where they had like these two you know, busty bikini models play the game and joke about, you know, Bass the wrestler power bombing the female characters, and his head would end up in between the girl's legs, and they would zoom and spin the camera around it. And so Evo cut the stream and they tried to make like they were embarrassed and whatever and all this other shit. And I think months later then it came out that I think Mr. Wizard or whatever his name was like creeping on, you know, minor boys. And so he had to resign his position as face of Evo over that shit. And he said that, you know, he was the reason that DOA never pretty much, you know, came, you know, as a game. Well, it would have been if they didn't have that, you know, live stream. But after that, he just banned the game because, you know, the community, you know, a lot of the FGC is on Twitter, so they started getting into that Twitter bullshit, you know, of SJW and basically other bullshit with the community that they were trying to push on Twitter. That Elon got forcing a lot of those weirdos to leave now, which is awesome. And so,
Claim victory.
yeah,
In the glory.
you know, that's that. You know, some people just like, I think DOA 6 is the worst selling mainline DOA game of the series, and that's because of horrible marketing and trying to come off as being woke or censoring your content that you're known for as a game that made you notorious, you know. And then I feel another reason why fighting games are, you know, quite a few people are backing out of it. Like I said, some, you know, gamers are getting older. You know, the people who were like young and talented, you know, even just like 10 years ago, are now in their 30s, late 30s, early 40s. And, you know, some of them got family. Justin Wong got a daughter. He got a wife. Some people got doing other things, you know, in their life, and they can't dedicate that time. Even though I think Justin Wong, he's still, you know, a sponsored paid professional for Panda Global. You know, I think he still does like Street Fighter League and stuff like that. He's still with the tournaments, you know, make himself, you know, some pocket money or whatever. You know, he still got to pay the bills. That man is going to be playing until he's probably 50 or 60 years old. That's what he's known for. And but other players, you know, they kind of faded out. Quite a few old heads, like from Street Fighter 4 days, they didn't like how Street Fighter 5 played. They still don't like how Street Fighter 5 plays. And even people who were playing Street Fighter 5 early on kind of got out of it. You know, they stopped playing the game. So it's like there's that too. Dang, she's just killing me with these blows, aren't they? Gotcha, bitch. Boop, 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 boop. Boop, boop. Dead. So yeah, a lot of these old heads got out of it. And so that kind of, you know, lowered the how, you know, the profitability of the hype era, because a lot of these players are no longer active. You got the new players. Some of these new players, like the new generation that came along, like around, you know, 2015 to like 2017. Well, there was that weird period between like after, where it's like a lot of the young players coming in were just obnoxious. Like Sonic Fox, you know, there was the whole teabagging thing that lasted for a whole year and a half. And, you know, people, there was a lot of, you know, trash talking in game. You know, there were pop-offs and stuff like that. You know, just the young generation, you know, who grew up in the whole meme and troll culture, bringing that to events, that mindset to events. And so, but now, like I said, they're young men, young women. You know, they're in their, you know, the early to mid 20s. And so, you know, they're still active, but, you know, they're maturing and getting older, and they don't do that same childish shit anymore. And even they, you know, there's younger people get to the game. There's teenagers who are playing now, who is even kind of, you know, almost beating their ass. You know, case in point, that dude in England who won a Street Fighter V tournament with Ed, and just went through a lot of the top names in Europe. And it's funny. I think Punk beat him in a recent tournament, and Punk is probably the best U.S. player. And Punk, he is like the return of Filipino champ. He mostly played Marvel vs. Capcom 2 and 3. He played a little Street Fighter. He was okay in Street Fighter, but his main game was Marvel vs. Capcom 3. He was the villain of, you know, the sweet spot of the hype era. But then he kind of got low-key canceled out of the FGC around what, 2020, over a joke on Twitter. He got banned by Capcom. He lost his sponsor. You know, all kinds of, just because he made a joke about he said watermelon lives matter. Granted, the timing of that seemed kind of, you know, kind of sus. It's like, even though I guess he does have black people on certain sides of the family, and it's like they even said that, you know, it was too soon, bro, too soon, you know, not the right timing. But he got canceled over a joke. Chris G got canceled, but he eventually came back. He said something concerning, I guess, this one chick, a representative, I don't know if Capcom or something. He made a comment, you know, I guess a black chick got ratchet on him, and he called her out, you know, and he, you know, called her out for being ratchet, and people thought he was being racist. He had to make a public apology and all kind of other bullshit. You know, he had to make amends in order for him to be, you know, back and active in the FGC and winning games again. So it's like, yeah, right now, I think that's the issue with the FGC, is just some of the controversy, some of the Twitter bullshit has made it into the offline scene. And that has scared people, especially a lot of casual people, from being involved. They're like, we don't want to deal with that bullshit. It's like, it's, you know, we just want to play our games and enjoy our games for what they are, you know, just games where we can just, you know, push buttons, have fun, fantasize about the character, you know, we're using, put our feet, you know, play this character as a role, you know, whatever. You know, just have fun and do some shit, you know, whether playing against the computer or, you know, playing against other people. Oh, he sidestepped that. If I was playing against somebody, I would have got murdered. I think after a while that I think people were saying like, oh, this character is pretty in the top tier. She does have a lot of mix, so she doesn't do crazy damage, but she can put you in a blender.
Victory will not
But
come easily. It must be
I think
seen.
another thing that is getting people out of fighting games is like, you can't come into a fighting game if you don't buy it at launch day. If you don't buy it the first week it comes out, you are going to be competitively behind everyone else. That means you are not going to have fun playing the game until it's going to take you longer. It's going to take you a lot longer to play the game to where it's at an intermediate level where you can beat people at your skill level or lower. And then to beat people who are better is when it's going to take a lot of time and work. Now, if you love playing fighting games at a competitive level, then it won't seem like time and work. Why? Because you find it fun. You know, if you love a game, if you're passionate about it, then putting in the work and time is fun. I said, but, you know, for certain players, you know, you put in all that time, you put in all that work, and then some people just don't pick up high-level play, you know, very fast. Some people will never grasp, you know, high-level play. So they will never get any better than they are. No matter how much work they put in, they will never, you know, be competent enough to where they can win, you know, at a regular basis. Maybe, you know, I would say for you to be considered good, you have to win against your peers who are good probably 50 to 60% of the time. That means you're good. If you can play against other good players and beat them half or 60% of the time, then you're good. If you're losing, if you're only winning 30 to 40%, if you're losing 40% or less, then you're not good. You're competent, you're intermediate, you'll put up a fight, but you were just not that dude. You're not good. that's just the way it is. It's like that's me not sugarcoating. Basically, it is what it is. And so, what I notice about most modern fighting games is that they're so mashy. It's like, even for me, when I jumped into, especially I think Dead or Alive 5 is a perfect example. When I jumped into Dead or Alive 5, granted, I wasn't playing a lot of Dead or Alive, you know, when the scene pretty much died from 4. So, I think since I got it, you know, the first week I was doing pretty well. You know, I was holding my own against people, you know, my skill level who were playing the game for the first time. But I was still getting my ass wrecked by good players. And then at a certain point, after the first major patch of Dead or Alive, where they just started nerfing certain characters and what they can do, it's like after that, man, it was a struggle to beat intermediate and good players. It's like I even lost the players who just put in a lot of time. I mean, religiously played the game. And it's like, it's funny because I've seen some of those players who I used to play. I think Kill Sumi, Hoodless. Dang, where's some other players I played? I forgot that one name. That one dude who was like an Ayane name. He got a YouTube channel.
Claim victory.
Some other players in DOA 5 who were pretty good, you know, who played in tournaments, and it's like, I beat some of those people. Granted, they beat me more than I beat them, but I have beaten them. And it's weird seeing them on a live stream and they're in tournaments getting their faces beat in. You know? And the only time they get to a top 8 if there's no real killers at that tournament, and then they'll get to a top 8 and then they'll still lose. I think the only one I've seen, win a tournament who I played against outside of Hoodless, because Hoodless is probably the best DOA player, is, what's that dude's name? I forgot his name, but he was an Akira main in DOA 5. And he was pretty good. I beat him a couple of times.
Blood, flesh,
but,
and souls are offered to the gods amidst
I don't know, the younger generation, it's like, they're of the work smarter, not harder generation. So I think for them, they have the mindset of, I think, kinda how most fighting game players had before the hype era, where it's like, get that. I want to get Raphael started. Where they had the mindset of, it's like, you know, I basically got my online play. You know, I got my Xbox Live. I got my Xbox 360. I'm just gonna, you know, beat people's faces in, you know, online. You know, I'm just gonna be, you know, be that dude online, and people were fine with that. A lot of casual players, you know, fine with that. It's like the hardcore DOA offline community, like in the early 2000s, they had to learn that the hard way, because they thought, you know, just because they played amongst themselves, they were like the best DOA players in the world. But then they went online, they were losing to a bunch of people they never knew. And they discovered that there were a lot of good DOA players that they never played before, who were better than they were. And then they tried to make excuses like, oh, if they're not going to offline events, then, you know, you're not really good. You know, you got lag and this other shit, which is understandable. I get it. Did I get him? Oh, I did. Oh, what? Now he hits her overhead, she has like extra sweep off the ground. That's crazy. And so,
the battle is over. Show respect for
yeah, they found out they were just big fish in a small pond, and then they got into a bigger, you know, ocean of players, and they found out they weren't as, you know, good as they thought. They found out they weren't the only good players in the world. And it's like, I'll see like DOA, US DOA pros for like the first month or so a game being a top 20 of the best players. But then after 3 to 5 months, 6 months, they'll startly be relegated to the top 50 in the list. They'll be in the top 50. Now, granted, a lot of the OG DOA players is like when DOA 5 came out, they pretty much were no longer really playing, you know, Dead or Alive. You know, you had Sonic Fox and these new people taking over. I think the only old head who still plays DOA at a competitive level is Rakuto. And he's been around since DOA Ultimate on the original Xbox, as far as playing, you know, competitively.
Very well.
Dude, he was one of the first like pros I played online. I remember because he used Jan Lee against me. That's not his main, but he was using it in that match. I got a round on him, and that was it. He beat my ass. But his main is Bayman. He's a Bayman specialist. Oh, this bitch. That bitch. So, but yeah, younger generation, they work smarter, not harder. And it's like, so I think the sort of like, in order to be considered, in order for you to have fun with fighting games, like granted, there are some beginners that play online, but I can't really judge that because I am not a beginner. I am intermediate in many fighting games, even though I don't have optimal combos or whatever. I've been playing fighting games for, you know, 30 years now. And over 30 years if I count, you know, the Karate Champ days at the arcade. And it's like, I know how to play these games, you know, how to use footsies, when to throw, when to punish, have some basic combos to where I can get some good damage in, you know, when to anti-air, you know, all the fighting game basics that is used in, you know, numerous games, applied in numerous games. So it's like, for me, it's like I'll get to, like, an example of this, I'll get to, I think, D rank, you know, in terms of ranking. This is why I start playing people my skill level. Now granted, oh shit. There are some outliers where people will pick up or have another account and they'll start from ground zero again just to raise their rank all over again, because some people, they'll see them and just don't want to play them because they know this person is either a dick or they're really good. And if people are playing rank, you know, they're kind of whore to get high ranks, probably for trophies, so they don't want to lose. Did I get her? that move. Oh, you bitch. Okay, I'm not blocking. There we go. Had to concentrate a little. And so yeah, it takes a lot more work to become intermediate at fighting games, even though I think it's easier to get into fighting games because, like I said, they're very mashy, they're very flashy. So it's like from day one, you can pull off some crazy shit just by button mashing, or just by, you know, spending some time in the lab for about 2 or 3 hours. You can come up with some shit, you know, to make the game fun for you. But yeah, I think for a lot of younger generation, like a new generation of players, is like the path to get to be good is too much of a time investment. And it's too much of a time investment that may never pay off, especially if they have a goal of being good at the game. Because like I said, some people just don't like, there's people who are part of the fighting game community but don't really like aspects of the fighting game community. You know, there are players like that.
But I am questioned by
And but I tell certain players who don't like, if they don't like the whole frat boy mentality of the FGC, I said you can get into the anime fighting game community, which seems a bit more, I guess you could say, inclusive and welcoming of players who have more of a beta mindset. Which is true. It's like, oh man, well, I don't know if I talked about this before, but I think there was one year when they had Anime CEO, and they had these two gay goos just showing too much public displays of affection during the live stream. They're like kissing and all over each other and on the bed, and they caught flack for that, you know. It's like, and from then on, they were like, okay, we can't be doing that shit no more, because it's like, because people find just like straight, they find straight people making out in public to be kind of uncomfortable. So let alone seeing, you know, two gay dudes being a little too affectionate. Oh my god, he is just out hitting me out of everything. This is just a bad matchup for this chick. Did I get him? Yep. Yeah, he's deadly from the mid-range. He has range on this chick. Plus, he was hitting me out of a lot of shit, too. You little punk. Oh, that's a good button. I like that button. Gotcha, bitch. But yeah, it's too much of an investment, and sort of like what I talked about, where I was talking about fighting games will never die because people just play fighting games for content. And I think that's where a lot of like casual players are going. They're going for content more so than being, you know, active competitive players in the offline scene, because I think that's what they're really seeing a drop in as far as here in the United States of people showing up to events. Granted, we're still in the COVID era and there's still people paranoid about COVID. And that, you know, pretty much is keeping some people to stay in the house, not to be in large groups of people. You know, that's understandable. You know, they don't want to risk it. I had a buddy go to San Diego Comic-Con this year, came back with COVID. There were some comic book pros who had COVID, but yeah, the odds of you bumping into somebody with COVID at a convention that has over, what, 200,000 people attending, then yeah, the odds of you catching COVID just go up a lot. Even if you go to convention where you just bump into like maybe 300 people, you know, the odds of you getting COVID is going to go up. You know, that's just common sense. But what's my last reason? I think just not many players recently, you know, want to be hardcore competitive players, you know, anymore. I think that generation is past. Z, you know, they do things for shits and giggles. If they're good at it, great. If not, they're not going to stress over it. They're going to just say, this is what I do. If I'm good or not, you know, it is what it is. You know, if I'm not good, I'm not going to stress over it. And if you call them out on it, they're going to get, you know, butthurt and offended. You know, you can't question. It's like this. The younger generation really doesn't have no heart. I hate to say that, but it's true. It's like we're in an age of an intelligence. You know, we got a lot of kids who were raised with an iPad or an iPhone or a phone and access to the internet. So they have been privy to the world. For them has been an open book. You know, they just got to go on Google and the internet for information. You try to argue with people based on your own knowledge, and they may not know shit, and then they'll just look up shit on Google and hold an intellectual debate on you just for looking up shit on the fly. So it's like, that's the generation we're dealing with. We're in an age of intelligence, not an age of strength. The OGs during, you know, the beginning of the hype era, you know, we were still in that age of strength. You know, that's, you know, how that generation was raised. It was a put up or shut up generation. And it was all about, you know, the machismo, you know, and being the alpha and being the best and things like that. But you got a generation who coming in now, it's like they'll compete, but it's not about being the best. It's just being there to compete. You know, if they win, then it's like they're going to say, you know, I'm the best, you know, and they may troll about it, but not many of them have that competitive fire. You know, many of them don't. They don't have the passion, and it's like some have the passion, they just don't have the competitive fire. And the ones who do have the competitive fire, it's like, you know, they'll go to events, you know, they like the camaraderie and the social aspects of the FGC. But many players don't care about the camaraderie and the social aspects. They really don't, unless they got a group of buddies like me for a long period of time, where I kind of fell out when I was playing Dead or Alive 5. I just had at least 6 or 7 good buddies who I played with 3 to 4 times a week for about 2 or 3 hours in those sessions of playing Dead or Alive 5. And it's like, I really didn't care about going to tournaments. I didn't even care about playing ranked. I didn't care about playing ranked to test myself against players, you know, for ranking or nothing like that. Like I said, during that time, I was getting into my, you know, my mid to late 30s. So it's like a lot of the competitive aspects I no longer cared about. I wasn't a face of the FGC. I had no responsibility to the FGC community as being a face or a representation of even the DOA community, of any community at that. I wasn't, you know, at a certain point I just stopped being a tryhard. That's the best way I can explain it. I was a tryhard between DOA, you know, DOA 2 Ultimate and DOA 4. Those were my tryhard days. But then after that, after we thought there was never going to be another DOA game, you know, DOA 5 popped up. And then people thought there was never going to be a DOA game, and DOA 6 popped up. And it's like, but I never wanted to be competitive after DOA 4. Like I said, I was in, you know, my mid-30s. And it was like I felt I did all that I could do. I still kept up with the FGC, the tournament scenes, as far as DOA and all that other stuff, but, you know, mentally, on a competitive level, I tapped out, you know, pretty much around DOA 5. I was done. And from then, It's like fighting games. I thought the community was okay, but I think, you know, a lot of the players, I guess the competitive players, are getting bored. Because like I said, it's like fighting game shelf life now is like a spirit of, you know, a period of 3 to 5 months, and then until a major patch come out, and then they'll change the meta of the game. They'll nerf some characters, they'll buff some characters. That'll breathe life into a game for another, you know, 6 months to a year before they release another patch. It releases another batches of characters. So just the way fighting games are made now is different. So it's like companies are trying to profit off of one game that they will stretch the life of for, you know, 5 or 6 years. It's no longer we release a game, people play it, and then that's it. Whatever happens with the community does whatever they want with it, and that's how it was. That's how it was before Street Fighter Five. Yeah, that's how it was before Street Fighter Five. Street Fighter Five, I think, was the first fighting game to do it more as a gaming as a service. It's like, yeah, they built that game over time. Street Fighter 4, they did it the old-fashioned way. You had Street Fighter 4, then you had another version of Street Fighter 4 come out. I think it was Arcade Edition. No, was it Arcade Edition? I think it was Arcade Edition. And then they had Super Street Fighter 4, so they were releasing a different iteration of Street Fighter 4 like every 6 to 12 months on disc. And then the series ended with Ultra Street Fighter 4, and I think a year later Street Fighter 5 came out. And but now Capcom is like, well, we can save some money and we don't have to do no pressing costs for cases or printing CD discs. We can just upload our updates through the internet, through the console itself. So, and then players, they can choose to buy it on disc. Like I did with Arcade Edition Street Fighter 5, and I was disappointed because I still had to download shit. All that shit wasn't on disc. And then a buddy hooked me up with Championship Edition. I do hope after Street Fighter 5, Street Fighter 6 come out, they do release a Street Fighter 5 Ultimate, edition, so I can have all the content on disc. If you're a casual fighting game player, collector right now, the best thing you could do is, like, unless a game is just straight up fire at launch, it's just wait. Just wait 2 or 3 years and let the game run its course, and then, buy a later version, of the game where it has a roster of characters you're really into, you're like, gameplay tweaks and stuff like that. It's got to the point where you can't buy a fighting game at launch. It's like, I don't know if companies are shooting themselves in the foot, purposely. They're playing the long game. I don't think Capcom's going to do that with Street Fighter 6. I think they're going to have 16 to 18 characters out the box on day one, which is pretty good, for a Street Fighter game, which is solid. Based on what I've seen of Street Fighter 6, it looks good, it looks solid, it's extremely fashy. I haven't played it, haven't got my hands on it. That'll be the last Street Fighter game I'll probably buy ever. But that game's gonna have like a 6 to 7 year life to it as well, with many iterations going forward, because that's how Street Fighter always been ever since Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 had 5 or 6 iterations, but that's not counting the many different versions, because I have like 20 different versions of Street Fighter 2 on my modified Xbox. I'm not lying. There's like 22 different versions, and it's like I think they did that with Street Fighter Alpha 3. They had 3 different versions on console. They had Street Fighter 3, Street Fighter 3 Double Impact, and then Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. Yeah, Capcom been doing that whole different iteration of games with Street Fighter since Street Fighter 2. So it's common for them to do that. But as of now, I think we're just having fighting game fatigue. Like I said, the hype era ended. The hype era had a good 9 years of fighting games being hyped from 2009 to 2018. It's just now that it's official. It's official right now. It's like people, I think Street Fighter 5, they just want a new game. Once they got a taste of Street Fighter 6, they're ready to move on. Because I think not a lot of people like Street Fighter 5. Street Fighter 5 is a polarizing Street Fighter game. Almost it got salvaged more so than Street Fighter. Did better than Street Fighter 3 because Street Fighter 3 was polarizing when it dropped because it didn't have no Chun-Li. The roster was weird as fuck. And players were not feeling it. They were not feeling the gameplay mechanics or whatever. And then when Third Strike came out, people were playing it, but it wasn't until after like Street Fighter 3 Third Strike went its course, and then a lot of people were able to get it in a Street Fighter collection on PS2 or Xbox or shit like that, that players start to, I guess, appreciate the gameplay of, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike. It didn't become known as a good game in the FGC until like 5 or 6 years after it came out, which is crazy. I think the same applied to Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It was hype at arcades. It was very hype at arcades. People played it at arcades. Well, I lived in the Bay Area, San Jose, California. So yeah, at arcades, people were playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2. When the Dream came out, not many people bought a Dreamcast, but I bought a Dreamcast. I bought Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I bought a lot of the Capcom fighting games on that system. But Marvel vs. Capcom 2 didn't really become big until it came out on the PlayStation 2. The same applies to SNK vs. Capcom 2, because SNK vs. Capcom 2 also debuted it on the Dreamcast. In Japan, it didn't come here, but I know you can get the first Capcom vs. SNK. Like, a lot of the Capcom fighting games on the Dreamcast were like almost arcade perfect. Yeah, a lot of people had PS2s, and the PS2, they can run those games, but they didn't run them arcade perfect. You still had flickering on your life bars, and some frame drops, some animation missing, even in the PS2 versions of those games. But yeah, people really didn't fall in love with Marvel vs. Capcom 2, until a lot of people got into it, until it came out on the PlayStation 2. It also came out on the regular Xbox. It was supposed to have online play, but they scrapped it before the game got released. But yeah, a lot of people are just falling out. The trend of playing fighting games has ran its course. It was a good decade run of people just loving fighting games, and the fighting game genre got oversaturated. People were producing a game, every year. Every year you had 3 or 4 major fighting games, coming out in a certain rotation. And so, yeah, I think people got fatigued. It's proof enough with DNF Duel. Games would come out, people would just hype them and play them for content. It's all about content right now. That's why a lot of these games are seeing pretty decent sales numbers, because people want to get in day one, produce content so people can watch their channel, so people can get that ad revenue. And that's what it is right now. So I don't think fighting games are going to die, but I think that in terms of the FGC is going to change. I think it's going to be reduced. It's going to go back to what it was before the hype era. It's going to become very niche, how it was when it started. A lot of the normies and the cosplay girls, the FGC groupie girls, the stream monsters, all of that is going to drop off. It's going to fall off by thousands of players. It is what it is. It's just time. Like I said, a decade run. A lot of these people have gotten older. Like I said, some of them in their 30s now. Some of them got different priorities in life. So that's just the way it is. The hype era is over with fighting games, and I think some of the old heads are trying to keep that vibe of the FGC alive, and it's like, I don't think that's going to happen. Fighting games are going to become more corporate because, like I said, Sony owns Evo now. Not only that, Sony is really pushing, Tekken 8, even though I heard recently that finally Tekken 8 is going to be on PC and Xbox. But when the first trailer came out, it said PS5. It didn't say nothing about any other consoles. And so, yeah, that's the way it is. It's like fighting games is going to be for content purposes only. I think in my last Let's Play, I talked about fighting games when I was talking about how there are some channels who just play older fighting games. You watch Justin Wong's channel, he's playing old-ass fighting games, like 90s fighting games that nobody never heard of. Way before he became a known name, he's playing these games for like the first time, and it's like, man, these games are a pain in the ass. But those are the games I grew up with, that I knew and loved, that I played. And it's like, it's kind of cool to see some of these people who are like the generation after mine playing the fighting games that weren't popular, that they felt was the dark age of fighting games. I think in terms of content, fighting games will never die. See, there's channels called, like, there's one called Loading Geek, and they're playing like all the freaking 90s 2D and 3D fighting games from America and Japan. And the person does not talk. They just go through an arcade run of the game. And he's averaging at least between 1,200 to 5,000 views just doing an arcade run of these obscure 2D, 3D fighting games. He gets people who, comment in this comment section about, oh my God, this brings back memories and all this old stuff. Like I said, the FGC, the people who play and collect fighting games, the casual players and people who love and collect fighting games, they outnumber the hardcore fighting game players. They outnumber them. They outnumber them like 3-1. And so these are the people who make these companies sell, that cause these companies to sell millions of copies. You got to get the people who just love your product for the product. They don't care about the competitive aspect of the product. They just like the product. And those are the people who you really, should really be selling your product to. It's like, it's good that you have like a high level community that can help market and sell your game to even more normal people by the way they perform in tournaments, do cool combos and comebacks and pop-offs and all that stuff. But then, as a player, reality hits you. You pop in that fighting game, and you're like, yeah, I go through arcade mode on the hardest difficulty. And then you go online, and then you're beating people, at your skill level. And then when you reach like rank D or C, then it becomes a struggle. Then it becomes work. Then you're getting your face beat in. And then you're trying to lab the game, you're watching YouTube videos, and yet you're still struggling, trying to get to that B rank, or try to get to that A rank, or try to get to that silver or diamond rank. And you're putting in hundreds of hours that you can't get over that hump. Like I said, that's casual players. They go only so far, and then they're like, the competitive thing is fun, but I just like the game for what it is. The offline content, the characters, the story, the lore, the gameplay options, the graphics, whatever they like about the game, they're buying the game for that. They're not buying the game just how hype it is. And that's why the hype era ended. Hype era brought a lot of new players in, but like I said, a lot of new players, they realized over time that the work, the passion, and the love and the talent, they don't have all of it to compete with the big names who are pros. It's no different between like a sport. You have, there's different levels, like they're talking about in one fighting game. There's a high tier in high school basketball, but high school basketball players are not as good as college basketball players. And then there's a higher tier in college basketball, but even the higher tier college basketball team can't even beat a European or professional Russian basketball team. And then you got the cream of the crop, which is the NBA, and that only has like 300 or something players, and that's the best of the best in the world, and that's the highest level, of the game and the sport of basketball. And people have accepted that. You know, there's some people who just want to get outside and exercise and shoot hoops. There's some people who say, "Oh, I got some handles and some can dribble. I got a decent jumper, so I can be like a schoolyard legend or a street ball legend." And then there's some players who said, "Okay, I'm good enough to be a starter on my high school team." You know, there's levels to everything. It's the same thing in fighting games. It's like you may be good just to own noobs online or just beat your friends, and then maybe you're good enough to become a regular and a known competitor at your local scene. And then you'll graduate to being you're the best player at your local scene. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to go to some well-known established tournaments like CEO or DreamHack or some other and try to go against the best of the best until you do get to EVO where you're playing against the cream of the crop. So then if you beat them, you're the best in the world. But yeah, there's levels to these things that many casual players are not going to reach that level. And so I think a lot of the recent generation are falling out of fighting games. Because like I said, it's about content. Because before, you wanted to be good, but you also wanted the paycheck. you didn't want to come there. You didn't want to spend that money on gas, travel, and hotel just to lose. But like granted, like some people, they just get into the FGC just for the social aspects. That's fine and good. Tournaments are basically low-key conventions anyway, because they have like people selling art. You can buy video games at video game tournaments. They have merchandise. They may have bands and other shit going on besides just the competitive aspects. But most players realize if you go in there, you know, you're putting money as an entry fee. And you're putting money in. It's like people don't want to go do all that travel just to lose. And so some people just like playing fighting games on the low key just for fun, shits and giggles. And if they got the personality, they could just make a name for themselves doing content. Like Maximilian Dude. Maximilian Dude, he dabbled in some high level tournaments, but he wasn't that good. He's decent enough to be competitive in various games for content purposes. You know, he has no problem going into the lab, you know, picking up some tech. He's all about doing the dank combos. So he makes good content, and that's what he's known for. That's how he became a face of the FGC as a content creator more so than as a player. So I think a lot of the casual players and younger generation are going that route as far as, you know, the younger generation in the FGC. It's like, because the days of the stream monster ended because once everybody started becoming woke and politically correct and SJWs came in, you can't just say random shit anymore. You can't, you know, start random flame wars. You can't, there's a lot of things you can't say or do, you know, publicly, you know, anymore in the FGC that will, you know, that's almost like social suicide. It shouldn't be that way. And it's kind of stupid that people are afraid to do things, but you know, when you're a pro, and if you come off saying or doing something stupid, it's going to cost you your sponsorship. It's going to cost you being at tournaments, even if you're not even guilty. Infiltration is a prime example of that. Whatever domestic dispute he had with his wife, that was between him and his wife. It got settled in court. He never served any time. Came to find out his wife was crazy, but yeah, on that note, folks, my controller still died. So I'm going to end this live stream. For those of you guys who stopped by and watched it, thanks for stopping by. For those of you guys who watch it later, thanks for watching as well. You guys stay safe and God bless.